I want to show you how to use the Litoměřice State Regional Archive website to find the vital records for your ancestors. And please excuse my Czech and German pronunciations. You want to start out by going up to the right-hand corner and clicking on the little flag. This will give us the option to select the language for the website, either Czech, English, or German, and we're going to select English. And then you see here in the center, there's a link to go to directly to the vital records. Those are the Matrici parish register records, including the baptisms, marriages, and burial records. This is the main screen that we're going to be using here. Before you search for your ancestors in the archive, you're going to want to have an idea of where they may have lived, either the name of a town or a parish. When you get here to the archive, you want to scroll down here to this section that says specific selection of parish registers, and you want this field here that says choose location, and you're going to type in the name of the town. You can type in the old German spelling or the newer Czech spelling for the towns, and it should accept either one. So we're going to do an example for my ancestors who lived in a Bohemian town called Mrzlice. And just hit enter. And the page that comes up is going to show you these results over here on the left. You can see here that there are 12 different results. Each of those is a register book for the parish. And it might look a little confusing, like what does all of this mean? But you don't need to know Czech in order to figure this out. There are some things that will be helpful to know. The abbreviations for the different vital records. N is for birth records or baptismal records. O is for the marriage records. Z is for the burial records. And the letter I indicates that the book has an index. So you can see here, this one is N and O, so that's baptism and marriage records. This book here has baptism, marriage, and burial records. If we scroll down, this book is just birth records. This one is just death records. And if you continue to scroll down, this one has baptism, marriage, and burial records, and it also has an index for the baptism, the marriage, and the burial records. And this one down here is burial records and the index for the burial records. So once you figure out which kind of records you're looking at, you will see the rest of the title here for the book. This signature is what it stands for. 5-1, that's the number that has been assigned to this book. This one is book 5-14, 120-1, 120-2, 120-3. You'll want to make note of that when you find a record. Keep track of the number of the book so you can come back and find it again easily in the future. And then after the title of the book, the number, it will give you a date range. So this one says 1591 to 1727. Important to note that if it's a book with more than just one set of records, so it has birth and marriage records or birth, marriage, and death records, that date range may apply to each set of records, or it could have the birth, marriage, and death records, say like the birth records for this entire date range and the marriage records for a shorter date range within those years. I can show you where to go to find that out too. And then here it starts to list all of the different towns that should be included in this book. And here you can see a longer list of the towns. In books like these two here at the top that have lots of towns in them, you can hold your mouse over the list and it will show the complete list. But here, this book only contains the records for the towns of Merzlitz, Razitz, and Tverdin. And this book here only contains the records for the towns of Merzlitz. So let's take a look at one of these books. If you click on this main description title of the book, it will take you to a page that gives you more details. You can see again here that this book is titled 120-3. It's a Catholic parish register. It's N, meaning birth records for these dates, and the towns included in the book are Hrobšíc, Merzlitz, Razitz, and Tverdin. And if you scroll down further, this can be helpful if you have ancestors who lived in towns that had name changes over time. It provides some of the different name spelling variations for the towns. So Hrobšíce was also recorded as Hrobšíc, or with an H or an R at different times. These aren't all of the possible spelling variations for the town. We found many more variations within the register books, but these are some of them that will give you a good idea. Here's the old German spelling of Merzlitz and the new current spelling Merzlitza. Same for Razitz and Tverdina. So the next step is to go and take a look at the digitized pages of the book. Do that by scrolling up here and clicking on this icon. And once that loads up, you get to take a look at the actual book. Just to get acquainted with how this page works, this tells you that there are 24 images that's scanned pages of, or scans of the pages front and back in the book. And you can select them either by scrolling down and clicking on any of these, or by bringing your mouse over to these icons on the left and scrolling up and down and selecting these here. That's a nice way to take a look if you're scrolling through and you're looking for where in the book it might switch. This book is just birth records, but you might want to see where in another book it might switch from birth to marriage or marriage to death records, or where there might be an index located in the book, and you can do that by scrolling down and seeing that most of these records look the same, and then here's a blank page or a mostly blank page, and so that might be a break between birth and marriage books, records in the book, or an index or something like that, and then you can click on it to take a closer look. You can also go through page by page by clicking this arrow here to go forward one page, or this one to go back one page, or these arrows here and here jump forward and back by a smaller group of pages, so you can move through it more quickly than going one page at a time. This arrow here will take you all the way to the back of the book, and this one will bring you all the way back to the front of the book. That's nice if you're looking for an index at the back of the book. You don't have to go through page by page. You can just jump back there. And here you can scroll in and out. And also, if you do find a record for your ancestor and you want to record what the source is, this is useful. A direct link to scan. If you click on that and then copy this and then paste it into your source, that will bring you back directly to this page. For some reason with this archive, when you copy the link at the top, it sometimes doesn't always bring you back to the exact page. It may bring you just to the first page of the book, or it might bring you back to this page with the description of the book. But if you want to have a link that goes directly to the scan that you've opened, you'll want to save it from here. So now that we are in the book, where do we go from here? You can start at the title page. There's often some kind of title page, and it can give you a good idea, especially if it's a book that has birth, marriage, and death records. It might say, Like here we can see the German word Taufregister, which means birth or baptism records. But you can also, this book, it just says N, it does not say I for index. So this book does not include an index. Oh, and just so you know, when I'm saying index, we're talking about a handwritten index in the back of the book, not a searchable typed index. But this book does not include an index. Otherwise, we would start by looking for that because that would be the easiest way. In order to start searching for your ancestors' records, you want to try to narrow down the date that you're going to start your search at. If you have a marriage record for an ancestor and you want to locate their birth record, you're going to want to look back about 20 to 30 years before the marriage record. We find that in America it may have been closer to 20, and at least so far for many of my Bohemian ancestors, not all of them, they may have been closer to their late 20s or early 30s when they got married. Also, if you have been finding birth records for children in a family and you want to locate the marriage record for their parents, easy rule of thumb is to start searching from the date that the oldest child was born in the marriage records. Start searching backwards from that date. And often they will have been married within a year or two before the oldest child was born. If you don't find it there, you want to start searching forward from the date of their oldest child's birth record. It wasn't that uncommon for them to have an illegitimate child and occasionally to have 2 or even 3 illegitimate children before the couple were married and maybe had more children after that. And it is possible that the couple got married and then the priest would have gone back in and written that the birth records of those children from that couple were then legitimized by that marriage record. So anyways, something just keep in mind, I always double check for any illegitimate births of children before the marriage record took place. So if I wanted to search for one of my ancestors, Engelbert Panewitz, I know that he was born around the early 1780s, and I want to take a look in this book. So we go up here and we see that this book, 1778 through 1784. So I may want to scroll down here to the bottom and start near the end of the book and see what the date is, and try to get closer to the early 1780s. So I'll click on one of these images over here on the side. Again, you can use this bar here to scroll to the different pages too. And I want to try to find a date. So I'm looking for headings that look different. You see all of these boxes look the same, and then here's an underlined heading. And here's another one. Sometimes those just indicate what month it is, and sometimes they're the year. So I want to zoom in by clicking on the page. You can also zoom in and out by using these tools down here at the bottom. And I see that we're in 1784. I know that this individual had a sibling born about 1785. So I'm actually going to want to go 1 or 2 pages further and just double check and see, okay, this looks like here's the beginning of 1785. Sometimes you'll see the dates written across the top of the page, sometimes they'll be at the top left column, and sometimes they'll just be indicated underlined in between the records or even in the records themselves. So we'll start at the end of 1784 and look backwards. And I'm looking for an ancestor named Engelbert Panewitz. Now, the good thing when you come to these records that have the columns, you don't need to know German or Latin or Czech to be able to figure this out. You just need to learn a few key words, and also, even if you don't always understand what every word means, you can figure it out by once you've practiced this and gone through a number of books, there will be a general format to these kind of records, and the column ones are really nice to get started with. So, for example, these columns here, and again, excuse my pronunciation, dies would be days, the date, baptizans, the person who baptized the child, not the child who got baptized. Infans would be the infant or the name of the child. Parentes would be the father and the mother. Patrini, another common word is levens. This would be the godparent and the witnesses. And religio, religion, locus, location, town name. And the house number would be here if they listed that. They list those in more recent books. So we're looking here. I know that the ancestor's name is Engelbert Panovitz. And so we might look here. Luckily, it looks like in these records, the father's surname is underlined. In this case, it's Simon. And you see this light gray underline. Someone has gone back through the records and underlined them, so they'll be easier to see. So we're looking for Panovitz. So we want to go back another page. And we'll just scroll through and see what we can find. So we're looking in this column where the parents would be. This family is Novak. And not Panovitz. You don't need to know how to read or pronounce every name. You just need to try to figure out if it's the name of your ancestor. Nietzsche, Schmelzer. If you look here, these little things that look like 2 dots or quotation marks down low means it's continued on the next line. Schmelzer. Heinz. And here it tells us we're in the month of April. We're going back. Martin, we're looking for the name Panovitz. Machka. And another name that's not Panovitz. And then we go back to the next page. So up here you can see this is the image of this page, and this little red box here shows what we can see here on the screen at the time. You can actually click on this and it will move that red box to a different part of the page. So see the red box moved down here, and so now we don't have to be confused about which part of the page it's showing. It shows us that right here. Here's Zimmerman family, Klager, Maschka, Herxum. Now we're at the beginning of 1784. Keep going. Spitzka, that's another one of my family names. Nietzsche, and I'm looking for Panovitz. Roba. So I'm going to go back one more page. And we should be getting pretty close because we know that his older sibling was born at a certain time, and it's not exact, but often the siblings were 1 to 3 years apart. So we're hopeful that we'll find him soon. We're looking for Engelbert Panovitz. Hauptvogel. Haupt, continued on the next line, Vogel. Wegwart. Zinka. Titel. And so I'm going to go up here and go to the other page again. Valenta, Rieger, Koch, not totally sure, Tens, Gens, either way, I know that it's not Panovitz, so you don't need to know everything. And look, here's Panovitz. The father's name is Ethelbertus. He was a sartor, which is a tailor. And the word uxor is the Latin word for wife or spouse. Barbara Elisabetta. And so these are, in fact, the right parents. So we know that we've hit the right family. And then we go over to the column. Remember, you can go up and remind yourself what the column headings are. This one is parentes, and this one is infans. So we're looking in this column to find the child's name. And his name was Engelbertus. You can see these little dots here showing that it's continued on the next line. So his name was Engelbert with the Latinized ending of US. And so we can go over here and see that he was born on the 31st. And up here at the top left corner, it says it's 1783. You can see in this record above that, it says in the dates, it says 13 et 14, 13 and 14. Just as an example, that will indicate the date that they were born and the date that they were baptized. In this case, when there's only one date written, you can expect that that is referring to the baptism. And in some books, they will only record the baptism date. In other books, where they're clearly recording both the birth and baptism date, this likely means that this individual was born and baptized on the same date. So we see the date they were born, the name of the priest, the name of the child, the parents. It will give their names. If you're lucky, it might give the maiden name of the mother. Someone may have written in a note later, if you're really lucky. It may give it should give the first and last name of the father, and it may give the occupation of the father, and it might provide more information about them. Here is the godparent section, where it says Levens, Josephus, Yasht, Colinus, that's a type of farmer. And the testes, that means the witnesses. Josephus, Vigvart, Colinus, farmer. Ambo ex Razitz, all from the town of Razitz. So that means that Joseph Yasht and Joseph Vigvart are both from Razitz. Et Maria Anna Uxor, Martin Schultz, Colini ex Robschitz, meaning, and Maria Anna, the wife of Martin Schultz, farmer from Robschitz. So sometimes the godparents and witnesses are really helpful because they may be relatives. Other times, even if they're not relatives of the family, it can help you if you're trying to differentiate between two different families with similar names, two different children with the same name that are born about the same time. Sometimes families will continue to use the same witnesses or witnesses from the same families. And so just keep track of the witnesses and godparents, because that can include helpful information. This indicates that this child was Catholic. He was born in the town of Razitz, and they lived in house number 48 in Razitz. Okay, now that we've found a record in one of the books, we may want to go back and take a look at the list of all the books for these towns again. So sometimes using the back and forward buttons in your web browser doesn't always work. It doesn't always take you back to where you wanted to go. So if you want to go back, another way to do that is go up here to the top left corner next to this tree icon and click on the link that says Metrica. That's the vital records. And when that loads up, it will take you to the page here that is the description of that specific book that you were on. Right now it's showing you're viewing this specific record. You want to click the X on that so that it takes you back to that list of all of the books that you had searched for before. So you could go back to the main website and do the search again, but that's a quicker way. If your web browser arrows aren't getting you back to where you wanted to go, that's a way to get back to that list directly without researching it again. So if you want to take a look at this list here, that book that I showed you was a very short book. It was 24 pages long. It just had the baptism records for a few little towns. Another thing that you'll run into is, let's see, for example, here's another book. This one is just for one specific town, but it has birth, marriage, and death records, and it says that it has indexes for each one. So let's take a look at this book real quick. This is book 120-5. We'll just click there. And you can review the information about the book, and then click on this icon. So when you get into the book, we want to take a look at, it shows that it's got indexes. We want to look for the indexes. Often a book will have the indexes listed at the end of the book. So that'll be the first place to check if you've got a book with an index. Sometimes, though, if you've got birth, marriage, and death records in a book, it might have the birth records listed and then have an index for the birth records, and then have the marriage records and an index there, and the death records and an index at the end for the death records. So in that case, it will be helpful to scroll down through these icons on the left to get an idea of where in the book it might be, so that you don't have to click through one page at a time. If you can see here, it will get down to page 25 and then stop. And that means you need to go to the next section of pages. And you do that by clicking this button here, the middle set of right-hand arrows. Click that, and it will load up the next set of images starting at 26. And what we're doing is we're scrolling through, and we can see we're looking for something that looks different. These ones all look like they've got records that are covering the pages. And then we get to this one that's got records at the top, and it looks blank, and a blank page. And so this is where we want to take a look and see, is this an index? I'm going to click here, and it'll bring the page up. And we got lucky. We found our first index. And you can see here, Index des Geburtsbuch. And it's helpful to learn a few words in German or Latin. This Geburt is the word for birth records or baptism records. And so that tells us we've got the index for the baptisms. You can see here the format they're using. They'll use different formats in different books. It may just be a long list. This has different letters for different surnames in different sections. So A, B, C, no names under any of those. D. They have one name under E, two names under F, and then you go to the next page. And zoom in. And you can either use these buttons here to zoom in and move it around with your mouse. This is the section for G, and there are many surnames for G. You can also move around on the page once you've got it zoomed in to the right distance by clicking on the image up here and moving around that red box, and knowing that, looking here and making sure that you don't miss anything, especially in an index where it's showing different sections like this. So it's good that we found the index for the birth records in this book, but we're actually searching, in this example, for a marriage record. So we're going to keep looking for the indexes for the marriage records. We're going to keep scrolling down, and here we can see that right now in this birth index we're on image 37. And so here we can see that it's showing, this one's darker, that's showing which image we're on 37. So we keep scrolling down past that, and we're looking for a page that looks different. We get to 50 and it won't scroll down further, so we click for the next section. And we keep scrolling down, and here is another section with index or something that looks different than the normal record. So we think it's an index. We're going to click on that. And we find that, yes, we found another index. And it's likely that it's the marriage records. One way that we can see that is when we look at the index, instead of just listing one person's name and maybe a date and a page number, it lists the names of couples. So yes, these are the marriage records in this index. We're looking for the marriage record of Elisabetta Spohr and her husband Martin Gruss. And if you come over here to the S section in the index, you'll find, look, here are some Spohr ancestors, S-P-O-R. But this is Anton Spohr and his wife Anna Maria Jan, Dominic Spohr, his wife Katharina Zimmermann, Franz Spohr and his wife Elisabetta Spitzka. Scroll down and see no more Spohrs. Does that mean that our Elisabetta Spohr isn't in this book? No. If you noticed, it's only listing the male names, the grooms, the husbands in the marriage records in this index. So we're going to need to look for our Elisabetta Spohr under her husband's name. If we didn't know who she got married to and we're just looking for a marriage record for her, fortunately in these it does list the maiden names of the wives, and this book isn't all that long. You could just scroll through all of the records and see if you find a female with the surname of Spohr. But we happen to know that who she married, so that makes it easier. Her husband's name was Martin Groos, and so let's zoom out and we'll take a look, and we're looking for the G section, and here it is. So we're looking for Groos. Here's Franz Gassig and Martin Groos. He's the second one, G-R-U, and this letter, if you're not familiar, is an esset. It sometimes looks like a B with a capital B with a long tail to us American researchers. Here's another one. That's an esset, and it's just a letter that means two S's. So Groos, Martin, Elisabetta Spohren. And often in these old German records, the females, they would add an IN onto the end of their surname, and that is not part of the surname. It's just indicating that it's a female's surname. So her maiden name was Spohr, S-P-O-R. And it tells us that we want to go look on page 44 in the book and to find that marriage record. Now, we've been looking at these image numbers. These are just the website image numbers. We're on image 53 out of 75. So we wouldn't go to image 44 and expect it to necessarily be handwritten page number 44. It's possible, but not very likely. We can get an idea by scrolling out and seeing what image we are on right now. Right now we're on image 56. There are two different ways that they may have done the page numbering systems in these old books. Sometimes they numbered each page, left and right hand side, with a different number. Those would be page numbers. Other times they numbered them by folio instead of by page, meaning that the page number that was written here, they wouldn't have a page number on the opposite side, because this page number refers to this page here, this side, and if we were to turn the leaf of paper over and look at the opposite side of that same page, that would refer to the same number. So in this case, since they are using the folio number system in this book, this is 56, and the opposite side of this sheet of paper would also be folio number 56. And even though here we do not have a number, this would be folio 55, and the opposite side of this same page or piece of paper would be 55 also. So back to our search, we're looking for the marriage record of Martin Groos and Elisabetta Spohr on page number 44. So we'll go back a few pages. And we'll just go back several pages and see, zoom in once we think we're getting closer. Take a look at the page numbers. So we are looking for folio 44. This is 46. We'll continue back here. This is 45. So we want to start taking a look here because they're doing the folio number system, which means that if this is 45, then this page is 44, and the previous page before this one is 44 also. it just so happens in this example that we're looking for page number 44 or folio number 44, and we happen to be on image number 45 out of 75. In many books, especially ones that have multiple towns in the same book, this number will not correlate so closely with the handwritten page number that we're looking for. It may be off by a lot more than that, but in this case, we just kind of got lucky on that one. So we're here on folio 44, and we're looking for the marriage of Martin Gruss and Elisabetta Spohr. And again, we got lucky. It happens to be the first marriage on this side of the page. Once again, we can take a look, let me zoom out a little bit, at these column headings, and that will give us a good idea of what we're seeing here. Here it tells you the year, and this information is the date. That says Monat, and Tag, month and day. Here, house number, und der Ort, and the place, so the town name. And you can look online if you don't know these terms. Everyone starts somewhere, it's totally fine. Look online for German genealogy words or Latin genealogy words, Czech genealogy words, and these kind of words will be something that you can find online to get you started. Also, Google Translate is far from perfect. It's not going to do the job on correct translations for long records, but typing in one word at a time to try to figure out what the column headings means, that's also another resource. Or a good German genealogy dictionary or Latin check. Here we've got Bräutigam. That is the word for the bridegroom or the groom. Here's Braut and Beistand, meaning the witnesses. So here we've got the name of the groom, name of the bride, the name and the Stand or the status of the witnesses, usually meaning your occupation and where they live. But here we've got these columns that may be a little harder to read because they're written sideways. But it's the same for both the groom and the bride. And we can see here, maybe it's a little easier to see on this one, religion. So this is talking about the religion of each of them. But these columns here, column headings, are written sideways. You could pick up your computer and turn it, or you can use these buttons down here to get a better look. Let's zoom in here on the brides section. And under religion, it's got Catholic or Protestant. Sometimes I've also seen Catholic or non-Catholic. And if you come down here, I'll show you later when we turn it back right side up, there will just be a dash indicated in which column. And then the next one is Altersjahren, so age in years. And then we've got Unverheiligte or Witwe, meaning unmarried or single, or a widow or widower. So then, when we turn our screen back right side up and scroll down, we can see in each of those columns that she is Catholic, her age is 32 years, and she was unmarried at this time when she got married. On the groom's side of things, we can see that he is also Catholic, and we can go up and look at each of the column headings as needed. He is Catholic, his age is 46, and he was a widower. So now that we know what those column headings say, let's zoom out and see the entire record and see what information it includes. We can see here that the date is 1800, anno meaning year, 1800, monat, February, month of February, and here is the date, 4th February. So they got married on February 4th, and we can go up and see each column heading. This is the heading for the house number and the town name. So in this record, the top information is listed for the groom, and then below that is listed for the bride. So he was from house number 14 in the town of Merschlitz, and she was from house number 58 in the town of Rositz. And this is the groom's name. We'll zoom in here. Martin Gruss, Schule Lehrer. So he's the school teacher in Merschlitz, in the town of Merschlitz. And here, this note, sometimes they'll have different notes that go across the columns in different records. This one says Bellini Herrschaft, meaning the region that this town was in. Sometimes in this same general area in other records, you might see the priest's name written across here. Or in birth records, this might be a place where you would see the midwife's name. Midwife, the word for that is Hebame. May not be pronouncing that right, but it would give the midwife's name there. In this record, we can see the priest signed here, Antonius Leonard Curatus, the curate. And so then it has the information about the groom. He's 46 years old. He's a widower. And then we've got information about the bride here. Elisabetta Sporen, so her surname is Spohr. Ehelika, so the word is, there's a little dash here that says the word's continued on the next line. The word is Ehelika Tochterin, meaning legitimate daughter of Franz Spohr, aus Rositz. Aus meaning from, Rositz is the name of the town. Then it says Mutter Maria, continued on the next line, Anna Spitzken. So Maria Anna Spitzka aus Merschlitz, and that's the town she was from. And we can see that the bride was 32 years old. She had not been married before. She was Catholic. 99% of my Bohemian ancestors that I've found records for so far have all been Catholic. I think we found 1 or 2 cases of ancestors who were not Catholic in these records. And then we come to the witnesses. Andreas Mikhailovich from Merschlitz, and his status, or if you see the column heading Stand, is Bauer, which is farmer. And the next witness is Wenzel Gruss aus Richtut. I'm not familiar with that town. He's a Bauer also. You can see here these 3 X's, or sometimes they look more like crosses or plus signs. They're not to be confused with when you see a cross symbol on a birth record, it may indicate that the child died, but these are witnesses, or in birth records they would include godparents. If you see X's or crosses or plus symbols, that's an indication that the person could not sign their signature for themselves. So sometimes you will see the records will be all in the priest's handwriting, and then there will be something that's signed in a different handwriting that's clearly written by a different person. That would be the signature of a witness or a godparent in a birth record. And these X's indicate that the priest wrote their name for them because they couldn't write it themselves. Okay, now that we have found our record and recorded the source information, we want to go back and take a look at that list of books for these towns again. Click here on the Matrica link and it will load up, and we want to click this X to close out of this record and go back to our list of books. If it doesn't show up right away, you can also click on this icon here, which says Show List if you hover over it. And it took us back. And so let's take a look at another kind of example. Oh, you know what? I want to take a moment real quick to mention something. In our previous example, we were looking at the handwritten indexes in the books. Those are pretty good. We are really blessed to have those for whichever priest or scribe or archivists may have gone back and taken the time to create those indexes for us. They're really great tools, but they're created by humans. There can be human errors, sometimes with the spelling of names, or it just might be different spelling variations. But also, things can be left out of indexes. And for example, we had one ancestor that we were searching for early on in our days of researching our Bohemian ancestors. And we searched and we found the book that we thought that they should have been in, and we looked in the index and they weren't there. And so we thought, okay, they must be in a different book, and we searched different books and surrounding towns. And finally we came back and thought, we can't find them anywhere. They should be in this book. They're not in the index. Why aren't they here? And we decided to go through page by page, and we found them in the actual book, and they were not listed in the index at all. They just got skipped. So make sure that you don't depend on those indexes 100%. They're wonderful tools, but use your own research. If they're not in the index, that doesn't mean they're not in the book. Okay, so back to our other search. Let's take a look at a different kind of example. One of these books that has lots and lots and lots of different towns in it. This book happens to be from 1591 to 1727, so an earlier date range than the previous examples that we've shown. So we'll click here to go into this book. This is book 5-1. We come here, and this will give us more information. We see here that the date range for this book is 1591 to 1727, but we see here that it says N for births or baptisms, 1591 to 1605, and 1605 to 1727, and marriages 1640 to 1727. So the marriages don't start in 1591. And if we go down here and want to get more information, we can again see examples of the original or earlier spellings of the town names compared to the current town name spellings. In some cases, there are several different examples of what the towns may have been called, or different spelling variations of those town names. And here on the side, it may indicate for each town what the date range is for the records. Birth records, 1591 to 1650 for this town. But in this case, you scroll down, and even though we know that this book includes birth and marriage records, all of these examples are only saying N, so that's only birth or baptism records, not the marriage records, and none of them in this list give a date range for the marriage records. So this book is obviously a longer book. It includes way more information for lots and lots of different towns, and it's going to take a little more research to figure out where the records are in the book. But let's go ahead and take a look. We can see here 742 images versus the 75 images in the previous example that we looked at. So once that loads up, we can take a look at the title page, and we can see the beautiful artwork of the priest. They took so much time, and the handwriting in some of these books is just amazing. Of course, in this book, it is just baptism and marriage records. There are no handwritten indexes, so we just need to take a look and try to narrow down the date range that we're looking for the specific ancestor and take it from there. So in this example, I'm going to show you how we found the record for Jacobus Stade. He's my 9th great-grandfather. We knew from the records that we found for him in other books that he would have been born around 1646. This is indicated on his death record. It gave us an age at his death. You got to make sure that you realize that the ages on these records are not always going to be exact. Often we find that they are within 2 or 3 years of being correct, meaning that the age on their death record, you go back and look for their birth record and it's within 2 or 3 years of the date that they would have been born to be that age at the death. Sometimes, occasionally, we've found that they may be off by up to 10 years, but usually they were within 5 years or so of the calculated birth date from the age on the death record. So we were looking page by page through this book, trying to find the birth record of Jakob Strada. And in this book, it has lots and lots of towns, as we noted before. And so this book is set up so that it has all of the birth records in one section and then all of the marriage records in another section. These are the birth records, and it lists all of the different towns in the same section. Occasionally you'll find another book that has lots of different towns and it will have a different section of records, birth records for every different town within that book. That gets a little more complicated to find them within the book, but just so you know, that is possible for them to format it this way. But this, I think, is more common. I found it more often that they would record them all together. And so, for example, I'll just show you how this book is set up. They've got 4 columns, 2 on each page, and you would go down and this Z would indicate and check that that's where it was from. So Z Derzinik. So that's the name of the town. And then this would be the name of the father and the mother and the child. And then Petrini is the godparents or witnesses. And someone has gone back through and with pencil later underlined the surname of the father. So that also helps us if we're scrolling through page after page trying to find a certain surname. That can be helpful. So each one also, you can tell when a new record starts because they've got the date listed over here to the side. So they usually have a new town at the top of a new record and a new date. This Jerzinek, and here's the father here, and the witnesses and the godparents. Zelenitz, the town name, and a new date. So we scroll through, and every once in a while, here in this case, we've got 2 words, Mayas and Agezda. That could get confusing because this is actually, Mayas is telling us it's a new month, May, not to be confused with Agezda. That doesn't mean August. That is actually one of the towns in this book is named Agest. So now we know that we're in May. And we keep scrolling down. This town is Berlin. And we use this page up here to move it and know that we're at the right place on the page and we're not skipping any records. Misti Bellini, the town. That one has a lot of godparents and witnesses. Mukov is the town name. So you can either be searching, if you know for sure that a person was from a certain town, you could just look at the records that come up that are for that town. Or you can look, if you're not too sure if they could have been at that town or one of the surrounding towns, you can look at the surname of each individual. Town is Radovicice. Okay, we haven't found him yet because we are looking for Jakob Strada. So we'll come up to the next page. Here we've got what appear to be 2 headings again. This Junius is the month, June. Kuterziks is the town. So we're now in the month of June. And Berlin. And we're looking at the surnames each time to see if we can find our person. Here's another record, another town. Agezda is the town. And we come up here to the top of the next column. Here's a new month, Julius. And this is the town, Razix. And I want to pay attention because I know that some of my ancestors were from Razix. And this happens to be the surname, so we found the record. Obviously, it's not as easy as that. You'll search lots of pages when you're doing it this way, but it's very, very exciting and rewarding when you actually do find your ancestor. So this is a pretty simple record format. On the 8th of July, we know that this is 1646. You can double check by, in these records, the year is not listed on every single page. It's only listed at the beginning of that year. And so you may have to go back 2 or 3 pages, but you can go back until you get to January and it will tell you the date. This one's 1646. The father is Mateus Strada. Just a note quickly here. His name is spelled M-A-T-E, and it looks like a G. Sometimes it can look like a Y. It could be open at the top, but it looks like a G. His name was not Mateg. The G is actually not a G. It's not a letter. It's a symbol in Latin that means us, or US. And so his name was Mateus, and it's just a Latinized ending, often put on the end of male given names. Mateus. So it may have also been written US in some records. But his name was Mattis, a form of Matthew, Strada. Conjux, that's another name, a word for wife or spouse. His wife's name was Anna. Infans, meaning the infant, the baby. Jakob. His name here is written Jakobus. It's that same symbol that looks like a G. So when I translate it, I would spell it J-A-C-O-B-U-S. And then it lists the patrini, or the godparents, sponsors, witnesses. Andreas. And this actually does not say his surname. For some reason in this record, occasionally they don't list the surnames. This says Andreas Z. Razitz, meaning from the town of Razitz. And this one is Ioannis Torrent. It does list the surname. And this is Maria Vovjakova. Sorry again about my pronunciations. But so we found this record. We're super excited. And what you would do next is save your source. Go here to save the link so that you can always get back to this exact image. You can click here to save the image to your computer. And when you're creating a source, you want to include that website link, the name or number of the book. This is book 5-1. You want to include the website image, so 157 out of 742, and the handwritten page or folio number. This one happens to be page 309, and obviously the date. And I would always like to write down a translation of what is written in the record. That way I can always come back and find it, and anyone else in the future who sees my research can always come back and find the record too. Since I've included examples with birth and marriage records, I want to include an example with a death record too. So I've jumped to a different book. I'm in book 120-2, and I wanted to show you that different priests will use different formats for their books. Some will use the columns with the headings. Others will just jot down the information. Others will use paragraph or sentence form. Sometimes for new researchers, the paragraphs form may be overwhelming at first because you don't know the language, but that's okay. I didn't know the language and I started either. I still am not, I'm far from fluent. I can't speak or have a conversation with anyone in these languages, but I can find these records, and you can too. It just takes practice. But let's take a look at this record. So here, the format that they use, the main thing we're looking for is patterns, because even if this priest does it differently than another priest in another book, he will use the same patterns over and over, and you can find those by comparing one record with the other records on the page or the surrounding pages. So let's take a look and try to figure out this the patterns that this priest is using. And often, once you learn to recognize like what information is generally included in a birth record, a marriage record, a burial record, and where will that information be listed, then you know what to look for, and you'll be able to, it'll become easier and faster over time. So in this record, it tells the date at the top, and it's listing the town names, because there's 4 different towns in this book. The town names are listed on the left-hand side. We're going to come over here. The record for my ancestor happens to be here at the bottom of this page. So we know that it's in 1742. She died, or was buried in Tvrtina. And this, especially if you're new research, this may look like a mess. Like, who could figure this out? Especially if you don't know the language. But you can figure it out. It just takes practice, and it's amazing. You can get to the point where you can interpret these records with practice without knowing the language. If you look online, you can look up research helps that will help you to learn the letters and how to read the old records and recognize words in German and Latin and Czech. Also, another great resource is if you Google FamilySearch communities, you can find these communities of members, users. It's free to join. And you can join the Czech community, you can join the Austro-Hungarian community, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and you can ask questions, you can post a link to a specific record and ask if other users will help you translate that record or figure out what a certain name or word says or what the spelling is. And people are really helpful on these. And you can hop on there in the future and help others too. So that's a wonderful resource if you're stuck on a record, or if you're just barely getting started and need help figuring out what these patterns are or what your record says. But let's take a look at this record, the pattern here. So it starts out with the date, den, so on 30 November. This word November, let me take a moment to just note. You see it's spelled N-O-V-E-B, and then there's this letter here that looks like, it's hard to tell sometimes. You can see an example of it here also. It looks somewhat like an L, sometimes it looks like a capital L or even a large C-shaped letter. It often drops down below the line into the next line of text. It's sometimes followed by a dot or a colon, or sometimes it's not. Just so you're aware for your research, this symbol is not a letter, it's not an L. It is another letter, symbol that means that the letter is the word is abbreviated. So all that this indicates is that they were writing the word for November, and they didn't want to keep writing and take up more space, and so they're shortening it, and this symbol at the end of the word means we're abbreviating this word. Anyways, so they start with the date, and then this word sepulta means buried, and then they have the name of the person. This says Maria, and we go on to the next line, and it's got her surname, Spitzkin. S-P-I-C-Z-K-I-N. In this case, we know that with many German names, on the female surname, they would put the I-N ending. That's just an ending that's not actually part of the name. And so usually with these kind of surnames, you'll find, like up here we see an example that this woman's name was Elisabetta Schmetzen. It's written S-C-H-M-E-T-Z-I-N. So her name was Schmetz, her surname was. Here we know, just because we compared with other records, that this surname here it's spelled again S-P-I-C-Z-K-I-N. Her name was not Spitz or Spix. Her name was Spitzka. It always had either an A or sometimes an E on the end of the name. I've talked to some researchers who know a lot more about these records than I do, have a lot more experience with the records and with linguistics, to ask, is there any way, if this was the only record that I ever found for this person, is there any way for me to know if it would have been spelled with an A or an E at the end? And they said no, the only way to know this is to compare with other records from different individuals and with the same surname. But so we know that this name was Spitzka, with an A on the end usually. But either way, the IN is not part of the name. It's just an indication that it's a female surname. Okay, let's go on. So we've got the date, the fact that she was buried, her first name, her maiden name, her surname. Sorry, that was actually her married name. And then this word is ex, E-X, meaning from. Eodem, E-O-D-E-M. And the next word is Pago, P-A-G-O. Eodem Pago just means the same town. And so in this record, we see that the town is listed over here at the left. So that's what it's referring to. In some records, if the town was not listed in this record and it says from the same town, it might be the same town as the record above it. And then this next part is nice to know, but it's less important for a genealogist who's looking for names, dates, and locations. Provisa obi sacramentis. This is talking about the last rites that she received in the Catholic Church before she passed away. And then it says 40 annorum. So it's telling us her age, 40 years old. So we get from this record that on the 30th of November in 1742, in the town of Tverdina, Maria Spitzka was buried in that town. And she was 40 years old at the time. Once you pick through and take the time to go through that record and figure out what that pattern is, you're going to notice that in all these other records, it's the same pattern. The town is listed over the left, the date, the name of the person, and the age of the person. And then you'll be able to go through the subsequent records way more quickly. So this is really helpful because not only do you get this information about where they were, when and where they were buried, but you also get their age, so that helps you to go and look for their birth record. Once again, it may not be that they were actually exactly 40 years old. It might be off by a few years, but that's a good place to start. And then the last thing that I just wanted to note is, say that you were done researching and you closed down the webpage, you saved everything, you saved your sources, you recorded the information about what the source was, and then you come back and you want to revisit that record or that same book again in the future. So you come back to the main webpage for the Litoměřice Archive, and how do you find that record again quickly? So just so you know, here's the quick way to do it. You want to go back to the direct link to the vital records or the Matrici parish records, and you don't have to go down and type in the name of the town and then search through the list of all the different books that come up and try to figure it out again. You can just go directly to a specific book, and the way to do that is you come down to this section that says specific selection of parish registers, and instead of typing in the location like we did initially, you go to this next field that says signature, and you can type in the number for the book. And so if we wanted to go back to book 5-1, we would type that and hit enter, and it will take you directly to that book. It will actually pull up any book that has those exact numbers in the book number title, and so it pulls up book 1-5 and book 5-1. So you want to double check and see which one it is you're looking for, but it pulls it up, And that's a nice quick way. If you didn't have the exact link, you were just going back to the archive website, but you knew that that was the book you wanted to access, that's the way you use that, that search field to find a specific book number.